Hey, what's up, friends? Devin here with Backcountry Exposure. I am with Ben from Knafs, and I feel like because we're talking knives today, you got to do it.
What is up, guys?
There it is. I love it.
Some people they have no idea what that is. Like, I was on YouTube for a lot of years, still am, and that's how I start videos usually. So it's fun.
I actually had to ask Ben his branding as a knife designer, which is what?
It is a WIUG.
WIUG, which is for what is up, guys.
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of weird. I designed my first knife, and they're like, "What's your maker mark gonna be? Like, what do you want lasered on there?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know." So that's what I did.
That's awesome. It's interesting because we're meshing two different industries in this discussion.
Yeah.
A backpacking, camping industry with how I approach my channel, and you in the knife industry, a knife designer owning a knife brand.
Yep.
And working a lot in like the marketing side of the knife industry as well. I want to talk about why take a knife on an outdoor adventure, whether that's camping, fishing, hiking, backpacking. Like, what's the utilitarian use of a knife and why it's important, and how to choose that. What is a good like checklist of things to look at when you look at a knife? Because is a $30 knife the same as a $200 knife? And what's the crossover between that? So
yeah,
have at it.
Dude, I love it. I guess the first thing I'd say is like, you're in the niche of like outdoor camping, backpacking.
Yeah.
Go one layer deeper, and the niche of knives is they're concentric circles, right? Like there's overlap in those.
Yeah.
If you go to outdoor retailer, there's knife companies there, right? But I do think knives kind of overlap in a lot of different industries and a lot of different places. It's man's oldest tool. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but that's reality. And so I ended up actually making YouTube videos for a company called Blade HQ in 2011.
Okay.
And that was my first gig during college, after college, making knife videos. And I always thought it would be fun to work in the outdoor industry, and tried my darndest to get into it, and like literally could never break into it in terms of like going to work at like a Keen or like North Face or wherever, right? Like I wanted to be in that space, but could never get into it. And I realized, you know what? Knives are actually really fun. So I kind of made a conscious decision to stay in pocket knives. I worked at Blade HQ, then went to CRKT up in Oregon. Worked there for about 2.5 years doing digital media. And while I was there, I kind of got to rub shoulders with like some of the great knife designers of this age. So like Ken Onion, I'd drive him around and we'd film videos together.
That's amazing.
Lucas Burnley, like Jesper Voxnay, it's like these people that have been knife designers for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And I would ride around with them and interview them for my job. And I don't think I ever intended to design knives or get into it. When you spend enough time in an industry, you start looking at it differently, and you're like, well, what if you started combining these two things and those three things and made something out of it? And so I ended up working at Blade HQ again, did a ton of YouTube, and when I was done there, I said, well, why don't I start designing my own stuff? And that's kind of where Knafs was born, is in this idea of like, there are still knife ideas that haven't been done, or kind of this idea of like 1% better ideas. How can you take a pocket knife and, again, combine these three things?
Moving the needle, what changes?
Because really, like a knife it is a handle and a blade, a cutting implement.
Yeah.
And sometimes they fold. Yours is a fixed blade, this is a folder. But really, there's not a lot to it. You can have a pocket clip, but handle, blade, must cut. That's a knife.
Right.
But then you get into the nuance, and it's just like backpacking, right? Like you're gonna shave an ounce here, and it's gonna be this high-speed material, and like knives, you can really get into the weeds on it. Like even down to like the molecular structure of the steel.
Blade steels, the material that's used for the handle, and the scales,
the heat treat, the Rockwell hardness, all of this stuff. Like it's an entire
the grind of the blade, all that. Jeez.
All of that. And so I kind of, with Knafs, I sort of saw this opportunity to not just make products, but also teach people. So like our first product was this knife poster that had everything I knew about knives on it. And I just wanted to brain dump, because I'd been like sitting at a desk for like 8 years, like looking at all this knife stuff, and it was finally like, well, what if I put it all in one place? And that's kind of where it started. And I just sort of built out from there. Like you do one thing and then you end up with I was thinking about a baker. A baker keeps baking because there's new things to bake. And
yeah.
That's kind of how knives are too.
Like how many different croissants can you make?
And there's surely a lot of croissants out there, right? So yeah, that's kind of my origin story. And then my wife and I started at 2018, and we took Knafs full time in 2022. Moved it out of the garage last year, 2023. And we've just been scaling. It's a wild rocket ship. We're at 9 employees. That's part-time and full-time. And just trying to make it all work, make it all happen. So that's chaotic.
Chaotic and amazing at the same time.
Thank you.
Kind of living the dream.
Sometimes it feels like a nightmare, but it is
sure.
I get to do stuff like this for work. Like I am not on the clock. I own the place, but I'm basically doing my job right now, and that's pretty dang cool to be sitting next to a lake, camping, backpacking, and
talking knives. Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so the question I want to ask to start, super high level, is how do I choose a knife? I'm not a knife person.
Yeah.
Let's say that somebody here watching is not a knife person.
Yeah.
But they know that it's a tool that's part of like an outdoor adventure.
Yeah.
How do I choose a knife? Like break down just the simple checklist steps of a fixed blade versus a folder, the size of the knife. Because I think there's like the stereotype or even just like the cliche that the newbie beginner backpacker is going to bring a like machete type of huge blade.
Yeah.
And you feel like, well, I'm going out into the woods. I'm going to have to chop down trees. I'm going to have to do all these like...
Going to have to romp through the jungle.
Aggressive things. And it's like, you really don't need to do that.
Yeah. And that's... So 2 questions when somebody says, what knife should I buy? Number 1 is, what do you plan to do with it? Where are you going? What are you doing?
Okay.
And then my second one is, how much do you want to spend?
Yeah.
Because you can literally spend anywhere from $7.99
right
at Walmart for an Ozark Trail knife.
Or even a razor blade.
Yep. Or you can spend $799 and get some sort of super steel with mammoth tusk in it, right? Like, it really just depends on like what are you trying to do. So if I were going backpacking or camping, I always like to have some sort of knife on me, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. If you have an $8 Ozark Trail in your pocket, great. I own a knife company, and I should be like, you should buy my knives, but really, what you've got in your hand, this is the Scandy. This is the Civivi Scandy that I designed. It's a $75 knife.
Yeah.
And some people might look at that and be like, that's crazy. And I'm like, well, cool, carry your Ozark Trail for a little bit. And you're going to find out, like, okay, maybe I want a little bit more performance. It's just like backpacking, right? Like, can you upgrade your stuff and get slightly better performance? Absolutely. But does it all of the backpacks are designed to carry stuff. That's what they do.
Yeah.
All knives are designed to cut stuff. And so I always start at like, okay, well, what do you want to do? If you're outside, I recommend a fixed blade. So that's a folding knife, meaning it's got a pivot and it opens and closes. And a fixed blade doesn't have any sort of pivot. A fixed blade is a little bit stronger. There's fewer moving parts and fewer opportunities for it to fail.
If any moving parts.
If any moving parts, yeah. Which usually there aren't any.
Yeah. But stronger in the sense that the build of the knife, this part that the scales or the handle, is referred to as like partial tang or full tang.
Full tang, yep.
Where you have steel that comes all the way through, and that's going to determine like how strong.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's going to be.
Yeah, correct. And this one's full tang, so it's got this is the Lulu, $230 USA made Magna Cut steel. Like, it's a high speed tool with like micarta handles, G10 underlays. Like, this is a fun tool. And
it's a Ferrari of knives, as you could say.
It is a bit of a Ferrari, but do you need a Ferrari to get to work? Like, you can literally drive a Honda Accord from Walmart, like the Ozark Trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's my thing is like, if you're not carrying a knife on the regular, or if you're not carrying one backpacking or whatever, I say carry one. Try it out. When I started working in the knife industry in 2011, I didn't carry a knife every day. I'd carried one in high school. I had a little Gerber keychain knife. Mm-hmm. That I carried all through high school, and then at some point it broke and I just kind of stopped. But you'd be amazed what you'll find uses for a knife when you carry one. I am not a self-defense person. Like, if somebody wants to rob me, here you go.
Right.
Yeah, you'll like that knife. It's a 75. You know,
Yeah,
like
have at it.
Have at it, right?
Yeah.
Like some people are carrying knives for self-defense. That is not me at all.
So there's the utilitarian aspect of, like you say, get a fixed blade knife if you're going to be outside.
Yeah,
But
doesn't
even-
have to be though.
But even within that realm, there's a huge gambit of, like, across the spectrum of what you can get.
Yes.
Machete, like
that's a fixed blade.
18-inch long blade.
Yep.
Or you could even go a super tiny, like
2.9-inch blade on that,
an inch and a half, like really, really small. And it all comes down to, like, what are you trying to do with it?
What are you trying to do? And I've seen people that whittle with machetes. They live in the Amazon. I like to whittle when I go camping, and so like
what we've been doing.
We've been working on
making
these spoons.
Making spoons.
And I enjoy that. You're not going to do that with a machete.
Right. Right.
So I always say, like, if you're going to be filleting fish, maybe get something a little bit bigger, you know. But it really depends on what is your task. If you've got I don't know, if you're building a shelter, maybe you're doing survival camp. People do that. You're probably going to want something a little bit bigger that has more heft behind it.
Yeah.
One thing about a small blade like this, 2.9 inches, is it does not hack. So if you get
I'm not going to go to a log and, like, start
No, not at all.
chopping with it.
Not at all. And you don't have to have a machete to chop with a knife. You get about a 3.5, 4-inch blade with a pretty hefty handle on it.
Yeah.
4.5. You'll be able to get some fulcrum leverage on it, and you can hack through.
Yeah, and you can do what's called batoning.
Yeah.
So you're going through wood that is not the size of your thigh.
Yeah, yeah. And so it really depends on, like, what is your style. And frankly, if you're going to be hacking, if you're car camping, bring an axe. Like, axes are great.
Yeah.
You know, saws. Yeah. Even if you got a saw, like, a saw is so much better at cutting a branch off than a knife is. A knife is a great all-around utilitarian tool, but I always say use the right tool for the right job.
Yeah. And I think that goes along with anything, if you're related to backpacking, the right tent, the right sleeping bag, the right XYZ, whatever it is, like, you need the right tool for the job. But I can see how, like, you look at a tent and you go, oh, well, of course I'm not going to take an 8-man tent backpacking.
Yeah.
That doesn't translate to walking 20 miles into the forest. That's a car camping.
Although we met a guy on the trail. Can we say that?
We did.
We met a guy on this trail here who was carrying an 8-man backpack for a bunch of scouts. They were all going to be in there. But some people do.
Some people do.
But I guess the beautiful thing is, like, that guy is out here.
Yes.
And I have a ton of respect for that.
Yeah.
Same thing with your knife. I've seen some absurd knives on people's hips. And I'm like, oh, like, should you really?
Yeah.
But also, like, hey, everyone has their style.
Well, and that's like that's kind of where I want to get at, because when I started getting into knives.
How many knives do you own, by the way?
Over 30.
Over 30, which is
over 30.
Which is a lot.
It is. It's too many. In a way.
Can you too many? Can you really too many?
Ask my wife. Ask my wife.
As a knife salesman, I say too many doesn't exist.
Sure. That's like saying, are there too many tents to own? Too many backpacks?
Right. How many sleeping bags can you have in your arsenal?
It's more knives than I can carry on a frequent rotation than arguably makes sense.
For sure.
So, no, it's not too many, but in a way it is. But the question that I have is, like, when I was looking at knives, and I'm not educated on all the nuances and the differences, because you look at, like, this and you go, what makes this $230?
Yeah.
Like, why would I spend that kind of money? That sounds ridiculous, right? Versus this knife, the Lander, which is
$45.
$45.
Yeah.
There's more moving parts to it. Why is this cheaper than this is? So that's the question I'm asking, is, like, how do I know that I'm getting a quality knife? And really, what's the difference between a $10 knife that I see in the gas station and a $230 or even $300 knife that I would see from Knafs or Benchmade or whatever brand you want to call out?
Yeah, I think the first thing to be aware of is like materials matter. It's the same in backpacking, right? Like, you and Hamilton have been talking about all these like Dyneema
textiles and stuff.
Textiles and fabrics, and it like whooshes right over my head, and I'm like, that sounds high speed. Handle materials, blade materials, even down to like screw hardness and things like that. All of that matters when it comes to how much a knife costs at the end of the day. Country of origin matters. So the lander in your hand is made in Yangzhou, China. Great artisans, their labor costs are cheaper. And so you're able to get a high quality product at a lower price. Whereas the Lulu that you had, that is made in the USA, made in Michigan. And so up front, you're gonna be paying a ton more for labor costs. It's an American steel, MagnaCut, which is like the latest and greatest high-speed, high-octane gasoline.
What do they call them, like super steels?
Yeah, they've kind of moved past the title of super steel, but like a little bit on MagnaCut. It's designed by a metallurgist who has a PhD in literally metal science for knives. And he basically said, well, what if we took like 3 atoms of vanadium and chromium and like all, like it gets into like literal science and chemistry. Yeah. And so you're paying for that PhD to design it. You're paying for Crucible, an American company, to make the ingots and make the steel, put all of those ingredients together, and it gets expensive. And then you put American labor on it and things get pricey. And so does this cut better than that? Honestly, no. But this will hold an edge longer. That's a D2 steel. So D2 is a high carbon steel, so it is more prone to rusting. It's a great, it's actually a tool steel. Little softer. It is a great steel for what it is, and especially at the price point, $45 for a D2 steel knife. That's great. But you can always go up. And I think like anything in life, you can spend more and get 1% better performance.
Yeah.
And I think, and there's a look to it too. Like, look at, I don't know, just styling and like.
It is pretty.
It is.
It is pretty.
But you could take the same thing and you could make this exact same knife in China for probably half the cost. But you couldn't get MagnaCut steel in China right now. It's not available over there. So
interesting.
There's all of these like factors, and so like it's almost like this matrix, almost like this dartboard. You're like, I'm gonna design a new knife, and you're like, I'm gonna do a micarta handle, and it's gonna be a folder, 2.9 inches. So there's almost these formulas that you just keep repeating to make something new. It's a kaleidoscope of ideas, and it's all the same pieces inside of the kaleidoscope. You spin it and create something new.
Gotcha. So my next question is, there's a lot of like, so you have blade length.
Yeah. That
plays into things, but also like the shape of the blade.
Yeah.
So from an outdoor perspective, if I'm a backpacker spending time outside, where I might be cutting cordage, maybe doing some whittling with it, I'm opening food packages that don't rip open properly, I'm cutting salami, cheese, those basic tasks. I feel like there's not a lot other things. Maybe you're like cleaning a fish.
Yeah.
But those are pretty much the simplistic things that you're doing from an outdoor standpoint. So like I said this yesterday when I pulled this out of my pocket. I mean, you've got three different blade shapes here.
Yeah.
So this is like
it's a drop point.
A drop point.
Yep.
This is a spay.
A spay, yep.
Which is not very common anymore.
No, it's kind of your grandpa's knife.
Yeah, you saw them on a lot of like those 3-blade slip joints.
Yep. Your old traditionals,
like the Bucks and stuff. And then I guess
it's kind of a straight back.
Straight back, okay.
Yeah. It's a straight back with a slight drop point.
Yeah, but then you have like Tonto and Warncliffe and I mean probably 10 other types. Like, what's going to be what should I choose and why?
What do you want to do with it? I hate to give a non-answer.
Those tasks. Those general outdoor tasks.
So my thing is, I really like drop points. So this shape right here. And the reason I like drop points is they're just very versatile for a lot of different things. So if you need to kind of like, for instance, if you're, this is a terrible example, but we're actually doing it today. So
Yeah.
if you need to get into the bowl of a spoon, you can kind of, you have enough space on that drop point to kind of whittle your way in there and be able to do it. If you were cleaning an animal, drop points, you can get your finger to the end of it and feel the end of the blade, so that you're not hitting gut sacks or anything like that.
Sure.
If you're cutting cheese, I don't know, it's just it's a nice blade shape. General use, general purpose blade shape. I'll tell you what though, a Wharncliffe, so Wharncliffes kind of look like almost like an eagle claw looking drop and then straight. Those actually get in spaces like this really, really nicely because they come to such a fine tip.
Oh, sure.
Which makes them fun. And so each one is a little different. Tonto blades are better for piercing or like fine detail work. Straight backs, these, on like an outdoor knife, if you're batoning it, it's kind of nice to have more of a straight on that backside of it so that as you baton, you're getting even force across it. But it really comes down to a lot of personal preference.
And I guess in some cases too, like this one doesn't really do it, but if you've got a ferro rod,
you can use it as a striker spine. Yeah. Yep.
Like I said, it's not going to do it, but
yeah. But you could literally take a Dremel to that and just flatten it out, and it would work perfect.
Yeah.
It's worth noting too. We've only talked about blade shapes. There are grinds too. So
that's what I was going to ask. Is like you have like flat grinds, hollow grinds. A laundry
Scandy. This is Scandy.
A laundry list of different grinds, convex, like complex grinds that.
The reality is, the different grinds will give you different performance in various situations. To the layperson, you're not going to feel the difference between a hollow grind and a flat grind. In fact, it's actually a fun experiment to do. If you do have a hollow ground knife and a flat ground knife, just take an apple and just cut an apple and see what happens with the wedge of apple as it comes off.
Yeah.
You'll notice with a hollow grind, it tends to split the apple a little bit more, where a flat grind kind of just goes straight through it and you end up with the apple piece. Yeah.
I was going to make that comparison of like food prep.
Yeah.
Your kitchen knives and stuff are typically a flat grind.
Typically, yeah. But some people
but a general's like chef's knife is going to be like a full flat grind.
Yep.
Yeah.
Full flat grind all the way. Scandy grinds are really fun. So a lot of people that are doing bushcraft, they like Scandy grinds because this Scandy, as you're whittling in particular, it sort of like splits things, and it's almost like the hull of a boat. Like it almost just like glides through it in a way that flat grinds, hollow grinds don't. And if you're a huge purist, you do a full Scandy. So it basically goes to 0 degrees all the way to the edge of the blade. Do you need that much nuance if you're just whittling in camp? No, not at all. But you can really take it to the nth degree and enjoy it. Or you can literally pick up an Ozark Trail from Walmart.
Sure.
$8. But then if you're like, well, hey, I want to expand this a bit, you can spend $30, $40, right? 400. And what you're getting is tolerances. You're getting craftsmanship. You're basically saying, okay, I am ready to. You and I were talking about a Benchmade Mini Osborne yesterday. Benchmade makes great knives, and you were just saying, wow, I didn't realize like how much smoother the opening is.
Yeah.
Well, does smoother opening actually affect performance?
No, it doesn't.
Not at all. Unless it's like a crunchy monkey that doesn't open.
But
right?
there is, like, I don't know, it's an interesting part of the knife industry where fiddle factor of a knife
it's huge.
Is huge. Like that is, people talk about that as a sale point of a knife. Like
people love the Scandy for that reason.
The Scandy, it's a little sharp. On the edge here,
on the flipper.
So I'm not gonna sit and like just flip this over and over.
You have to develop the callus. On your index finger.
I've got some work to do. But this one's cool too. Just as a side note, you've got a pair of tweezers in here, and a really sharp. Take the enamel off of your teeth.
So
toothpick.
Okay, let me tell you about the toothpick. So when you design a thing. sometimes things
get it out.
get moved around in the idea. So the original idea here was to make a toothpick. And if you wanted, you could literally take this and rub it on that rock and turn it into a non-sharp toothpick.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful splinter puller. So for an outdoor knife, and
blister.
Yeah, you could pop a blister with that.
Yeah.
Hit it with some alcohol first.
Yeah, right.
My recommendation. But this is like a secondary tool that you can have with you. And I think it's worth noting, 90% of people that are out in the woods could probably just get by on a Swiss Army knife. You'd have your tweezers, you'd have your toothpick.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't like promote other people's brands, but you know what? Like, I've spent 13 years in the knife industry now. I've shilled everybody's knife that's out there. I have my own brand, but frankly, like, I sell Swiss Army knives in my store because they're great.
Right. But you don't make Swiss Army knives.
I don't.
And if it comes down to that whole discussion of what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
Not every Knafs product is going to fit
No.
the checklist of I need a knife to do this. Well, the Lander's probably not going to be the knife for what that person needs.
Correct. Yep. And I think like one thing to keep in mind, like I've got a big old scar on my thumb from a Swiss Army knife. They're slip joints. They don't lock. They're non-locking folders. So they're legal in a lot more places, especially Europe. But I've got scars, you know? So you're giving up one thing in favor of another. And it's a game of trade-offs for everything. Which I enjoy. I get a kick out of that. And it's part of the reason you walk into bakery, and going back to our bakery, you've got the croissants, and you've got the donuts, and you've got a loaf of bread, and you've got beignets and French bread. Like, because people want different things, and knives are the same way. You have to just look at them and say, well, what am I trying to do with it? A lot of people like the Scandy because it's slim in the pocket. So this profile, the way that a knife sits, so the Lander has, I don't know, that's probably 1/4 inch, bordering on a 1/2 inch more space in the pocket that it takes up.
From side to side.
From side to side, yeah.
Not your depth, but like
not your
side
depth.
to side.
Yep, your side to side this way. And some people look at that and they're like, well, I want it to be super thin in my pocket. Well, the trade-off is you don't get quite a broad blade. So everything is design trade-offs. If you don't want a broad blade, you get a skinnier blade and you get a skinnier handle, but you're not going to get as much flow through in your cut.
Yeah.
So it's all trade-offs, and there's not as much strength in a piece of steel this wide versus one that wide.
Right.
So I think that in the same way, when you choose a backpack, you're saying, okay, well, is this 2 pounds or is this 3? And does it have these 4 features?
Framed versus frameless, or yeah, there are trade-offs for sure.
But I think a lot of people, like, they literally could just Harbor Freight a razor blade, and it's going to get you through most of what you need. But I think when you get into the artistry of it, when you get into the fun of it, the fidget factor that you were talking about, there's a lot of really interesting things to learn, and if it interests you, get involved in it, you know. It's a fun community, and I know people with 300 knives, you know. You've got a long way to go.
You got a long ways to go.
Man.
Only 10% there.
But I kind of got into it because I realized, like, it's a community of people that are really fun. I have the disease. You probably have the same disease with backpacks. I look for pocket clips in public. So if somebody's carrying a pocket clip, I'll be like, I'm like looking over here at their pockets in the most awkward way possible. And if I'm like I've literally been standing in line in the grocery store behind somebody, and I'm like, Microtech, huh? What you got there? and they'll pull it out, and they're pleased as punch that somebody is like recognizing their $350 knife in their pocket because they spent good money on it.
Yeah.
And like 99% of the population has no idea that they have the coolest knife in the world in their pocket, and they want to tell you about it. So I just get a kick out of, like, it's a really, I almost feel like what Knafs does is it gives people community. We're not solving world hunger. We've been talking about Sawyer water filters and how they're helping with clean drinking water across the world. We're not solving a true world problem with pocket knives, and anybody who tells you they are is lying to you. But I think the problem that we're solving, I told this to a friend the other day, is loneliness. And what I mean by that is the knife community is this really interesting, wonderful group of misfits, is the way I would put it. And I don't say that demeaningly.
Sure.
But if you are interested in pocket knives and you encounter someone else who is interested in pocket knives, number one, your whole family doesn't want to hear anything about MagnaCut.
Yeah.
They're tired of it.
Yeah.
And you just connect. You start talking steel and makers and brands, and you're fighting over degrees per side when you're sharpening and all this stuff. And is that solving a real world problem? I would argue it does. Do you have to like buy in at a $300 price point to be part of it? No. You can literally show up to Reddit, Knife Club, Budget Knives, whatever, with your $30 knife and be like, what do you guys think of this? And people will give you genuine opinions. So I get a kick out of that. It's similar to the outdoor community.
Yeah, I was going to say the parallels with like the backpacking community it's right there. It's polyester fabrics versus Dyneema fabrics. What kind of weight can you save on this? Ultra versus this for a backpack use.
But ultimately, you all end up
outside.
Yes.
Having the same experience.
Yes.
Regardless of what the gear is. And
Yep.
we've even seen that. You have a 14-year-old backpack. I have a brand new backpack.
Yours is higher speed.
It's higher speed. I'm cooler than you.
You are. We know this. You're a professional backpacker.
So far from the truth. Not even. That's a joke.
But I think I don't know. Everyone should find something that just makes them happy professionally if you can. Like we still need accountants, and some people love accounting. But find something that you really enjoy. And for me, I enjoy designing, but frankly, the thing that keeps me in knives is I look around, I'm like, I like the people. I like the camaraderie behind it. And you can walk around a trade show like Blade Show in Atlanta. You can be like, hey, what do you think? Walk up to the most famous knife maker in the world and say, what do you think about this? And they're not going to say, oh, I have an NDA and I can't talk to you.
Sure.
They'll be like, oh, your grind lines are kind of wonky, but I really love the handle. And it's an industry that is very much focused on helping other people be successful in the industry, which I get a kick out of. I think
awesome.
that kind of goes along with my own ethos of if you can help people along the way.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay, so this is the $1 million question.
Oh boy.
Which there's not an answer to. But let's say I've got $50 to spend and I can only buy one knife. What is that knife?
Have you considered the Knafs Lander? I have to it's so funny because I'm probably I'm the owner of a brand. My wife and I own it. And I should probably be better at yes, mine is the very best.
The promotion of it,
But the reality is you could probably get a better steel for $50. One thing I like about the Lander, I'm gonna shill it for a minute.
Let's do it.
The scales are swappable, so you remove 4 screws and you can fast swap the scales. And that's not a necessary feature, but you can get some pretty cool scales for it. You got we make these timberline patterns or a trout, like a rainbow trout. And it allows you to customize it in ways that are really fun. But frankly,
it's also really approachable.
Yeah.
I'll mention that just from a user, consumer standpoint, it's cool to be here with you. That's a lot of fun. And that's not an opportunity that everybody gets to spend time with somebody that's a professional in another industry. Yeah. But knives are complicated.
They are.
From a folding standpoint, there's bearings and washers and tolerances with if you over tighten a screw, it can
then you can strip the screws.
It can funk things up and now it doesn't have the same action that it did before.
Yes.
This, you don't have to completely rip the knife, the knife apart and mess that up, which I think is really cool.
It's almost like swapping the hubcaps without having to pull the wheels off and do realignment on your car.
Yeah, I've got an expensive Benchmade mini bug out that I changed the scales on. It opens.
Did you hate your life?
It is awful. I need to take it somewhere and get it fixed because
I'd take my Benchmades apart and they would end up in a little baggie for a couple months, like a plastic bag, a Ziploc. Because I'm like, you spend an hour or two and you're like, I hate this. Like, throw it in the bag, throw it in
And
a drawer.
we're not throwing shade at Benchmade.
No. It's just, there are ways to manufacture products that make them easier or harder to disassemble. So part of my philosophy, I've kind of bought into the right to repair movement and like the own your stuff, fix your own stuff, DIY. And a big tenet of that philosophy is like, you should be able to repair your things. And so some of these companies, if you even take the scales off or take the pivot out, you voided the warranty.
Right.
And I'm like, sorry, this is not a Tesla.
That's silly.
Yeah, like, this is not. And so we don't void the warranty if you tear your knife down. We sell spare parts on the website. So if you are doing it over your carpet and you lost a screw, well, we sell them on the site. So I get a kick out of just the ability for people to own their stuff and take control of it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
But yeah, if I had 50, to answer your question, a lander one is a great option. But I also think, man, it goes back to my original thing. What are you going to do with it, right? Because if you could get a really great Swiss Army Victorinox that has toothpicks, tweezers, and a magnifying glass to start a fire if you have a problem. You could get a great Kershaw that's spring assisted. So if like you just opened that knife really well, some people have a hard time flicking knives open like that.
I mean, you hand a knife to somebody that doesn't know knives, and they're like doing this
two-handed open, yeah,
and that's cool.
Yeah,
I don't care if you open a knife two-handed versus one-handed. Yeah. Like, it doesn't make you any better or less important than somebody.
It's more fun one-handed though, right?
But then also like even how you close a knife.
Yep.
Like, and I have one more question that will make it a quick answer, but like, how do I close it?
Yeah. So what you got there is a liner lock knife, and so when you're closing it, I always tell people do it two-handed, and I think it's a 4-step operation. Take your thumb, push it across, move your thumb out of the way, take your left hand, and close it. Yeah. As you get better, you just do it one-handed.
Which I've been doing sitting here.
Which is, you and I, Mr. 30 Knife Man, and I don't know how many knives.
37.
37, sorry. I have lots of knives at this point. Friends from friends, people give them to me, but you get very, very used to the liner lock mechanism because I don't even think about moving my thumb. I move my thumb every time, but it's
just second nature.
It's muscle memory at this point, and so each one is different. Each one is fun.
So that's the question. To close this out, what is your favorite lock style on a folding knife? Because you have like a lock back Axis style lock. The Axis lock is the trademark name for Benchmade.
For a crossbar lock, basically.
A crossbar lock. Then you have a liner lock. Then you have a frame lock.
Yep.
Then you have
all sorts of different.
What is the Spyderco? That's
a compression lock.
A compression lock. Yeah. Slip joints don't have a lock, but they might have some kind of like detent ball that like creates some resistance, so you don't just like flip it onto yourself.
Yeah, my favorite is a crossbar lock.
Okay.
And the reason for that is you can hand just about anybody a crossbar lock, and it intuitively tells you what to do with it. It's just a brilliant design. Like, if there's a book out there called The Design of Everyday Things. You said this is going to be a short answer, but I'm sorry. We're going here. The Design of Everyday Things, and it talks about doorknobs, and doorknobs should tell you how to open it, how to close it. Do you push? Do you pull? The crossbar lock is the ultimate doorknob to a pocket knife because it tells you exactly what it wants to do, because you can see the space that you need to pull it down. So you can hand somebody a liner lock, and they'll be like, cool knife, and they'll hand it back to you open. Yes. After they have fiddled trying to close it. They're like, I don't know how to do this, take it back. Yeah. And when you hand them a crossbar lock, it comes back closed. And the other thing about it is it doesn't ever put your fingers in the cut path when you're closing it. So with a liner lock, your thumb's going in the cut path, and then you're moving it out of that cut path. With a crossbar lock, your fingers are both on the two sides, and you can just flick it closed.
And a good fidget factor.
Good fidget factor, yeah. And it means, it's ambidextrous too. So liner locks are typically right-handed. Most lefties, most southpaws will get very used to doing it left-handed and no problem. But yeah, crossbar locks are very intuitive and safe and ambidextrous.
Awesome.
So yeah,
awesome.
There you have it.
There you have it. Bunch of knife talk. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that.
We talked backpacking too, though.
We did. We did. But knives are cool. They really are. And I thought it was maybe 10 years ago at this point that I told you, I'm like, I had all these knives growing up that were in $20, $30, just like gas station, cheap knives that brother-in-law got me for Christmas or brother got me, and didn't really use them. And then I was like, I'm going to invest into a knife. I'm going to spend $100 on a knife. And I thought, what am I doing? I just spent $100 on a knife. Like, that felt ridiculous. But then it became like a succession of like learning and like understanding a completely new industry.
Yeah.
And I think that's the takeaway for me a little bit is I think it's important to learn new things.
Yeah, I agree.
And knives are an interesting thing to learn.
They are.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. I enjoy it, and it's why I've stayed in the industry for 13 years. I've made my career out of it, and I enjoy it. And man, I wake up in the morning and I get to do things that are super interesting. I've been to cool places in the world around knives. And it's like, cool.
And meet cool people.
It's the best people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So there you have it. Knife Talk with Ben Petersen from Knafs. So
Thanks,
check out Knafs. Links down in the description for what we've talked about today. And yeah, you're also on Instagram, YouTube.
Yep. Just look up Knafs. Knafs. It's a 5-letter URL that we bought for $12.99. Let's go.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Right on, man.
Appreciate you, man.